Hello, welcome to another Israeli Frenemies, broadcasting to you from Tel Aviv, Israel. Ari Fold, my co-presenter, co-partner in crime, is away again. And this week we have to stand for him, Uri Bank, a friend of many years, the only person so far who beat me on a debate, at least that's what I think. Uri, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Uri. It's good to be back with you around the table.
Yeah. And Uri has strong roots in the Israeli right and the settlement enterprise in Israel, and I'm looking forward for this show.
So am I.
Great. So let's dive into the issues. So when we're shooting this, there's a huge controversy. There was an attack and a killing of two Israeli policemen last week on Temple Mount. I think the first time since Israel's control of the mountain 50 years ago that you have casualties on Temple Mount, Israeli casualties on Temple Mount. As a result, the Israeli police, the Israeli government put together metal detectors at the entrance of the Temple Mount, and that created a huge uproar within the Palestinian community, the Palestinian Muslim leadership, and also in the Arab world. There are now concerns about possible big demonstrations that, as we know, many times lead to bloodshed, which can erupt the whole very fragile situation between us and the Palestinians. The Israeli government says, we after this killing took place and this attack took place, we have the right and responsibility to put security measures. The Palestinians say this was not done in coordination with us. This is a change of the status quo in one of the most fragile and how would I say it, dangerous places in the world. And I think, Uri, and I would love to hear what you think about that. I think that once again, the Israeli government climbed on an unnecessary tree. The Israeli security agency, the Shin Bet, says there's no need for these metal detectors. The Israeli military says this can create an unnecessary clash between Israelis and Palestinians. We were okay 50 years without those metal detectors. If anything, we should do something in coordination with the Muslim leadership, both in the Arab world and obviously on the Temple Mount itself. And for this principle of we put it there and therefore this has to stay. And maybe it was done from good reasons. Now it might be a really stupid, I'm sorry for the harsh word, reason to get into bloodshed because of these metal detectors.
I don't understand how anybody can call metal detectors after two policemen were killed stupid. It's basic security. Nobody can call a metal detector provocation. It's protection. Really what's been going on in the Temple Mount for the past 50 years is outrageous. It's one of the most outrageous situations in the whole modern Western world. I never could understand, Uri, maybe you can explain to me, how left-wing, liberal activists for human rights can adopt a situation or accept a situation where there's one religion that negates the rights for other religions to have a basic freedom of any democracy, which is freedom of religion, freedom of prayer, freedom of worship on a holy site. That's something that Israelis and Jews never do. You talked about us liberating the Temple Mount from the Jordanian occupation 50 years ago. ever since then, we've fought for freedom of religion on all holy sites for every other religion. And the Muslims, under the threat of terror, which they use time and again, whether it's the rocks or now killing, say to others, you can't pray here. And you, Uri, and the left wing and the international community, for some reason, accept this instead of being on one issue on our side, telling the Muslims, look, either you allow everybody up there and everybody has equal freedom of religion, or you're not going to be there. You can't threaten others. Jews and Christians should be able to pray there just as freely and easily as Muslims, or nobody at all.
The problem is, there are two problems in what you say. And of course, the principles sound, they make sense. I mean, why not? The problem is that Temple Mount is a disputed area. Although Israel unilaterally annexed this area, and by the way, annexed the area, but never took control of it and never actually forced its sovereignty there. Why? Because all the Israeli governments, including this very right-wing government, understand that this is a point that can erupt into actually a world war of cultures.
There's the constant...
But hold on. I believe, and I've been in parts I took part in talks with Palestinians about the future permanent status agreement. I know that in a context of a peace treaty with the Palestinians, in which there'll be an arrangement in Jerusalem, I believe that eventually this holy basin will be an area that will be exterritorial, will be shared by the three big religions, and there will be rights of free worship there, or an arrangement for Jews too. As long
why wait
as
until
we
then?
are,
Why wait until then?
because now we are
holy sites are not something that have to do with peace agreements. If it's a holy site and there's a basic tenet of democracy, which is freedom of religion for all, and Jews fight for that,
there's
for
no
the
democracy
Muslims
for Palestinians in East Jerusalem. We're not talking about
Palestinians.
Equal citizens in Israel.
We're not talking about citizenship. We're talking about holy sites. There is no holy site in Israel that a Muslim can't visit and worship freely, and a Christian can't worship freely. It's only Jews that are being not allowed to pray in their holiest place in the world.
So this week, last week, Ari and I spoke about the submarine gate, I would call it. Another week with more arrests, possible testimonies that would make Netanyahu's position even worse. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu was the head of opposition, and the former Prime Minister Olmert was in power, and all the investigations against him, and he ended up in prison, as we all know, only started, the head of opposition, Netanyahu, said, a prime minister that has this cloud of investigations, criminal investigations above him, can't really make responsible decisions because his mind is elsewhere, and therefore that Prime Minister, Olmert, has to step down, and we need to either replace him or have early elections. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has this submarine scandal now with potential bribes, with people very close to him, his most trusted lawyer, who's his cousin, and so on and so forth. He has this investigation about getting gifts from billionaires, cigars and champagne, and he also has the investigation about him trading with a newspaper owned by Sheldon Adelson. Now, and he also now has a new scandal in the Ministry of Communications that he's also responsible for. And one of his right-hand men is now in arrest. Why this principle of him having to step down is not applying to him himself? I mean, he said so.
Ori, after so many years of being in politics alongside me, you're surprised when the head of the opposition says, oh, the current prime minister has to step down for whatever reason under the sun.
No, but he
was doing his job, so you're quoting him back to himself.
Definitely.
I have news for you. Even Benjamin Netanyahu is innocent until proven guilty.
But Olmert was
That's
too.
a basic, right? Okay, so, but he wasn't, he didn't step down because Netanyahu told him to.
By the way, he did.
Not because
Netanyahu, but
told him
because
to.
of, yeah.
Because at one point it became too much. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has a tenure of many, many more years than Olmert, and many, many less suspicions against him on the level of Olmert was a shady lawyer going back to the days before he became a politician.
No offense of Olmert that he eventually served time for was done during his time as prime minister. It was all when he was mayor in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Netanyahu is being investigated for actions taken as a prime minister.
I would argue that the Prime Minister Netanyahu is a much greater man than previous Prime Minister Olmert, who always was a shady character. There's no comparison between
this shady character, by the way, we all should thank for, because due to him, according to international reports, there is no nuclear.
It's not that he didn't ever do anything good for the state of Israel.
The Syrian effort to have a nuclear
I'm not saying
reactor.
that he never did any good, but the bad overdid the good. In this case, the things that have been leaked from this.
By the way, what did Netanyahu do that is so good? Really, I'm trying to find even one thing.
He's led the country with much less terrorism and a much clear security front than any previous prime minister. He's kept the quiet. He's kept the quiet.
That's an achievement.
That's a huge achievement in the Middle East when we've had terrorist attacks that have had thousands of killings ever since the beginning of Oslo. Prime Minister Netanyahu, if these allegations come to light, will have to step down and be interrogated. But we've seen it, even an objective.
Even somebody from the indictment, you think he needs to step down, right?
Yes,
because he doesn't think so.
Okay, but if he's indicted by the legal system, but everything that we've seen shows the opposite. There's an overzealousness when it comes to going up against Netanyahu and bringing more and more things that have been leaked before about the submarines.
The Attorney General is his appointment.
It doesn't matter. Of course he is.
The Chief of Police is his appointment. Because these people are not the left. Right? These are people who, I'm
not saying that
his appointments.
I'm not saying that
who are investigating.
They're doing their jobs. They're
but
doing exactly what they should be doing.
He blames the left and the media, as if the media is reporting about stuff that his appointments are doing.
No, it's what started first. What's the egg and what's the rooster?
Investigative media is one of the basic pillars of democracy. Right. And of course, Trump doesn't like it, Netanyahu doesn't like it, but it's part of democracy.
Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't say that these people shouldn't be interrogating him once there are suspicions that have come to light.
Well, he hints to it. He says, this is all done by the left, this is all done by the media.
He says, I'm innocent. Again, surprise, surprise, the Prime Minister says the allegations are false.
Why do you report about investigations that are going down? And let's remember again what the investigations are. Not necessarily, by the way, that even if Netanyahu is not involved in that, it seems like, okay, I won't even say whether he's involved or not, because as you say, it hasn't been proven yet. The fact that during his watch, Israel paid billions of dollars to submarines that the Israeli defense forces did not want, and bribes allegedly.
I don't know that the Israeli forces.
The Minister of Defense said so. The Minister of Defense was done behind his back.
The previous Minister of Defense, alone, had nothing to say about this until the day that he left office. No, all of a sudden he's against the.
He now testified that it was done behind his back. We're talking about billions of dollars.
If it was done behind his back when he was in office, he should have spoken up then. He should have said, as the Minister of Defense of the State of Israel.
This guy is from the Likud.
I don't think that anything that he's saying now, after he's been dissed by the Prime Minister, can be
But
really.
The question is whether he was dispatched because of this, because he was preventing these really bad, allegedly criminal actions being taken place.
Maybe yes and maybe no. It can go either way. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is again.
We just said, here's my tank. So we're talking now about Putin and Trump. Apparently, according to media reports, reached an understanding that, Netanyahu says, I'm not part of this. Israel was ignored. There is a possible Iran-influenced strip that would be very close to Israel, and in parallel we hear that the U.S. is taking out its aid to anti-Assad regime groups. And the question is are we going to be the ones who are going to pay the price for this Putin, Trump, or U.S. Russia understandings in tomorrow's Syria?
Maybe, and we have to learn from that. That even our biggest ally and friend, the United States of America, who always have our backs, that's only true until there are bigger interests at stake. When the United States have their own interests, bigger fish to fry, we're going to be the first in the frying pan. And it just proves to me what the National Campaign in Israel has been saying all these years, that we have to look out for ourselves. And even if we have great friends and allies, and I do trust President Trump and especially Vice President Pence.
You're preparing for the next day. Trump might not be there in a year or so.
That I've known Mike Pence for many years and have worked with him in the past. And yes, he was one of the chairmen of the Israel Allies.
You worked for him?
Yeah, worked with him in the past. He was the chairman of Israel Allies Foundation, which is a group of caucuses, pro-Israel caucuses that we set up, and he chaired our caucus in Washington, D.C. So I know Vice President Pence, and I truly trust him to have our backs. But we're not the only piece on the playing field. And when they have other interests, then they might push us aside. And that's what they seem to be done in the Syrian. And I'm not shocked. I'm not dismayed. I'm a little disappointed, as I am with the fact that Trump didn't move the embassy to Jerusalem immediately.
And is promoting
even though he promised
big
he would
deal,
do so.
or how did he call it? The ultimate deal.
Right, the ultimate deal.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is ever going to come to fruition because we know the Palestinians and we know how they never miss a chance to miss a chance.
We are, your government will be willing to make the necessary compromise, which means dividing the land between Israel and Palestine?
Even though I personally disagree with it, unfortunately, Prime Minister Netanyahu is still on the two-state solution, which I think is...
You actually think that Netanyahu, apart from paying a lip service or paid a lip service, you see Netanyahu actually going for a two-state solution?
Unfortunately, yes. The way that he's designed it, though, that there's going to be no military in Judea and Samaria.
By the way, I was part of the Geneva Accord, and the Geneva Accord is a demilitarized Palestinian state on borders based on the 65th line.
I personally think that's ridiculous and will never work. But you're asking me if Prime Minister Netanyahu believes in that? Yes, and I don't think the Palestinians. This is why I'm not afraid of Trump trying to bring the ultimate deal, because the bottom line, you can say anything you want about Trump, and lots of things have been said about him, and he can't very much be read or what he's going to do, unexpected. But he's a businessman. And the bottom line, he brings good business deals. And he works on his business senses. And he's proven himself. You can't take that away from him. And he's going to broker...
So far, he has the poorest record
not as a president.
As president.
No, I'm talking about as a businessman.
Oh, as a businessman, okay.
And when he brokers a deal, then I think that we can trust his business senses, and no good deal can be brokered here with the two-state solution.
He hasn't given up yet.
Well, he's going to. My prediction is...
You might be right.
My prediction is that we're going to go to a one-state solution, and West Bank is going to be... As you know, Israel is known as the Jewish democracy or the democratic Jewish state. And one of the biggest issues on the church and state agenda has always been what the rights will be or the place that same-sex marriages or couples have in Israeli society. It's a very contentious issue. You have ultra-Orthodox and religious sides of society who don't abide by same-sex marriages. Obviously, seculars would be pro being anti-LGBT, anything in this day and age is considered not politically correct. Uri, let's hear what you have to say on the recent Supreme Court judgment that same-sex marriages cannot adopt children in Israel.
It's not a judgment of the Supreme Court. There was an appeal to the Supreme Court, and the state's position was same-sex couples should not be allowed to adopt. Because Their lifestyle is too unique and would create problems to the adopted kids. First of all, I think, of course, I completely disagree with the state's position on this in this appeal. I trust the Israeli Supreme Court, that is one of the last institutions that is guided by the democratic principles of equality, would accept the appeal and would repeal this this law that says that only men and women can adopt. But to me, it's more than that, just this issue. And I really hope that the Supreme Court would take the right stand here, which will be to allow this. I think the hypocrisy of the Israeli government, you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself and many of the government's spokespersons, whenever they go abroad, they say, you know, what makes us such a great democracy? These are the LGBT rights in Israel. Now, when it comes to a real right that can be granted to, you know, to couples who really can be, you know, great families, people who are law-abiding, who have great jobs and everything, preventing them from adopting. But when you go abroad, you know, for Hasbara, you say, oh, we give LGBT rights to everything. That's the government's position. This is hypocrisy.
It's an interesting word, Ori, that you're using, hypocrisy, because I find the left wing that you represent and the secular left wing totally hypocritical when it comes to the item that started this program today, the Temple Mount. There's overriding considerations, and we can't give equal rights to Jews to pray on the Temple Mount. So you're saying what you're saying is there are overriding, and when it comes to LGBT rights, all of a sudden there are no overriding considerations.
This is in Israel itself. It's not. There's no international issue here.
But there are overriding considerations when it comes to
what are they?
So I'll explain it to you as an Orthodox Jew, albeit a very liberal Orthodox Jew. But even the liberal side of Orthodoxy, or Bible believers, or Christians that believe in the Old Testament, can't abide by same-sex marriages or equal rights for same-sex couples. Now we believe tough. It seems that the state of Israel has made a decision by its majority that is saying that's fine. But what we're saying is the way that we perceive the world is that there's a difference, a basic difference between men and women. And men have their strengths and their weaknesses, and women have their strengths and weaknesses. And therefore, the state of Israel, at least, and many other democracies around the world, have decided that the normative, according to the law of that state, which was voted in by majority, is that a heterosexual couple.
I bet you that if every child, most Israelis would go for same-sex marriage and for same-sex adoption. So before we'll end the show, I was earlier this week in a concert of Guns N' Roses, a band that I used to really like as a teenager, and was great being there. Seeing Axl Rose and the Slash, and also Radiohead, which were attacked heavily by Roger Waters for coming here. I, by the way, think that artists should take a stand according to their ideology. I don't think they should be intimidated or have to ban their ideology just because they have external pressure. But, you know, if Roger Waters doesn't want to come here, you know, he cannot, you know, it's okay. And if Radiohead wants to come here, that's perfectly fine too. I, of course, want everybody to come here because I'm an Israeli and I like rock. But, you know, it was good. It was a sign of normal times in a very, how would I say it, non-normal era.
I think that Radiohead really has a good following here in Israel. And I think they had 3 of their international concerts were here in Israel. I think they had that start on some level.
Yeah, they started in Israel.
On some level here. I don't like when artists flaunt their politics because they weren't voted in by the voters.
And thank you, Uri Bank, for being here. I hope to see you again in the future. Ari Fold is traveling a lot, so it's there are always good opportunities. And thank you, everybody, for being here, and see you next week.